One millionaire begged a single pregnant mother, "Pretend to be my wife for a few days." The reason left her speechless. And what started as pretense turned into a forbidden romance that changed their lives forever. Get ready, because this story will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and comment on where you're watching from. Sweat trickled down Sarah Johnson's forehead as she leaned over the old Singer sewing machine, her skilled hands guiding the navy blue fabric under the needle that danced incessantly. The suffocating heat of March in Savannah made the small workshop in the old town almost unbearable, even with the colonial windows wide open. The ceiling fan spun lazily, moving the heavy, humid air rising from the cobblestones outside. "Sarah, you need to take a break," said Mrs. Thompson, the owner of the shop, watching the 29-year-old who had been working for over 10 hours straight. "You're 7 months pregnant, dear. This pace is going to be bad for you and the baby." Sarah raised her brown eyes, revealing deep, dark circles that contrasted with her tan skin. Her curly hair was tied up in a messy bun, with a few rebellious strands sticking to her sweaty forehead. She had delicate features, but her expression carried a steely determination she had inherited from her grandma Mary, who had raised her alone after her parents died in a car accident when she was just 8 years old. "Mrs. Thompson, you know I can't stop," Sarah replied, her voice heavy with fatigue but firm. "The rent is 3 months overdue, and if I don't manage to gather at least $500 by Friday, Mr. Smith is going to evict me. And pregnant with a belly like this," she gestured to her prominent belly, "who's going to rent me another place?" The workshop was small, with whitewashed stone walls that had seen better days. Sewing machines from different eras lined up in 2 rows, and the wooden floor creaked underfoot. Colorful fabric scraps piled up in wicker baskets, and the scent of new fabric mixed with the smell of oil from the machines and the characteristic humidity of the historic buildings in the old town. "And what about your doctor's appointments?" Mrs. Thompson asked, genuinely concerned. She was a stout, motherly black woman in her 60s who had known Sarah since childhood. "You can't skip prenatal care, dear." Sarah sighed deeply, her hands moving automatically to caress her belly. "The last appointment cost $150. The public healthcare system takes too long to schedule, and the private doctor said the baby is a bit small for the gestational age. I need to do some extra tests, but—" her voice choked. "I don't have money even for the basics, let alone for tests." The heavy silence that followed was broken only by the noise of the other seamstresses working and the distant sound of drums echoing from the streets of the historic center, where there was always some cultural performance happening. Sarah returned to work, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from an explosive mix of determination and despair. "Sarah," Mrs. Thompson began, approaching and placing a calloused hand on the young woman's shoulder. "You know I would help you if I could, right? But the shop is also struggling. Tourism has decreased since the pandemic, and orders—" "I know, Mrs. Thompson," Sarah gently interrupted. "You've already done so much for me by giving me work when others wouldn't even hire me because I'm pregnant. I'll find a way. I always do." This was not an empty phrase. Sarah had faced adversity her whole life. When Grandma Mary died from diabetes when she was 17, Sarah found herself alone in the world, but she didn't let it break her. She worked as a saleswoman, cleaner, waitress, anything honest that came her way. She learned to sew by watching tutorials on YouTube on her cracked screen phone and practicing on scraps she collected from the workshops. Her determination was legendary in the neighborhood. "The baby's father," Mrs. Thompson ventured cautiously, knowing it was delicate territory. "Disappeared," Sarah replied tersely, not lifting her eyes from the sewing. "When he found out about the pregnancy, he said he wasn't ready to be a father and that I should take care of the situation. He blocked my number and changed jobs. I haven't heard from him in 5 months. His name was Raphael, a middle-class guy she had met at a summer festival the previous year. He seemed different from the other men she had known, thoughtful, polite, with plans for the future. For 3 months, Sarah believed she had finally found someone who would truly love her. The pregnancy had not been planned, but when she found out, she felt genuine joy, imagining that she would finally have the family she had always dreamed of. Raphael's reaction was a bucket of cold water that still hurt her. "Sarah, you're a nice girl, but I'm 24, just starting my career. A child now would disrupt all my plans. You understand, right?" She hadn't understood, and she hadn't forgiven. "Tomorrow is Sunday," Sarah said, changing the subject. "I'm going to take some handmade pieces to sell at the farmer's market. Maybe I can make a few extra bucks." Mrs. Thompson shook her head, admiring the young woman's resilience. "You shouldn't be on your feet for so long, Sarah, and lifting heavy things, Mrs. Thompson." "With all due respect, I don't have the luxury of resting," Sarah replied, finally stopping the machine and slowly getting up, one hand supporting her aching back. "My grandma always said that if you don't have a dog, hunt with a cat. I don't have a dog, so I'm going to hunt with what I have." She walked to the window, watching the activity outside. Tourists were taking pictures of the colorful facades of the colonial buildings. Street vendors were offering corn fritters and coconut candy, and the sound of life pulsed through the cobblestones that had seen so much suffering and joy over the centuries. "You know what else Does it hurt, Mrs. Thompson?" Sarah asked, her voice lower now, almost a whisper. "It's not even the lack of money. It's the feeling that I'm failing my child before he is even born. What kind of mother can't even provide a roof over her child's head?" "Don't say that, dear," Mrs. Thompson scolded firmly. "You are the strongest woman I know. This baby will have a warrior mother who teaches by example that life can be tough, but it's always worth fighting for." Sarah smiled faintly, her hands again caressing the belly where she felt the baby move. "Sometimes I talk to him," she confessed. "I tell him about his great-grandmother, about how New Orleans is a magical city, about the drums he will hear when he is born. I promise I will find a way, that he will have education, opportunities." "And he will," Mrs. Thompson affirmed. "You can be sure of that." As the sun set behind the historic buildings, painting the sky orange and red, Sarah finished her last piece of the day. Tomorrow would be a new day, a new opportunity to fight. She didn't know that fate was about to place a life-changing proposal in her path, a proposal so unexpected that it would leave her completely speechless. Sunday dawned with the typical grey-blue sky of late summer in New Orleans, heavy with humidity that promised rain by the afternoon. Sarah woke up at 5:30 in her small room in a shared house in Maplewood, a working-class neighborhood that was a 40-minute bus ride from the historic center. The house was simple. 2 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, and a bathroom she shared with 3 other tenants. Her room barely fit a twin bed, a plywood wardrobe, and a dresser where she kept her few belongings. "Good morning, my love," she whispered to her belly, as she did every morning. "Today, Mommy is going to work hard to ensure you have a better future." She got up slowly, feeling the weight of pregnancy in her back and legs. In the small, stained mirror of the shared bathroom, she observed her reflection. Despite the fatigue, her eyes still sparkled with determination. She decided to wear the blue cotton dress she had sewn herself. It wasn't fancy, but it was comfortable and concealed her belly well. In the tiny kitchen, she prepared a strong black coffee and ate 2 slices of bread with margarine. It wasn't the ideal breakfast for a pregnant woman, but it was what her budget allowed. Afterward, she grabbed the tote bag where she kept her handmade creations, beaded earrings, crocheted bracelets, small fabric dolls inspired by local traditions, and some sachets scented with herbs she bought at the St. Roch market. The bus to the center was crowded, as it always was on Sundays. Sarah squeezed between domestic workers, heading to their jobs, vendors loaded with goods, and tourists with cameras hanging around their necks. The smell of sweat, mixed with cheap perfumes and diesel from the engine, created a stifling atmosphere. She held tightly to the metal pole, protecting her belly with her free arm every time the bus swayed around the sharp turns, heading toward the historic center. "Watch out for the pregnant lady," shouted a woman when the bus braked suddenly, and Sarah almost lost her balance. Some passengers murmured in support, and a young man stood up to offer his seat. Sarah thanked him with a genuine smile. There was still kindness in the world, even in small gestures. When she arrived at the farmer's market, the sun was already high and strong. The historic building, with its imposing columns and faded yellow facade, buzzed with activity. Vendors were setting up their stalls with crafts, clothing, musical instruments, and souvenirs. The aroma of hot corn fritters mixed with the salty scent of the Gulf of Mexico, which sparkled turquoise under the morning sun. Sarah didn't have a fixed stall. She couldn't afford the rent. Instead, she spread a colorful blanket on the ground near the main entrance, carefully arranging her products. It was a strategic location. Tourists arriving via Canal Street or the historic district stairs passed by there before entering the market. "Sarah, dear, you are so brave," exclaimed Mr. Smith, a 60-year-old craftsman who sold wooden sculptures at a nearby stall. He'd known Sarah for 2 years, since she started coming to the market. Pregnant like that and still working in the sun. "Hi, Mr. Smith," Sarah replied, adjusting the last of her scented sachets. "Work doesn't kill anyone. And I need to save money before this baby is born. Has the father really disappeared?" asked Mrs. Thompson, a plump woman selling corn fritters from a stall across the street. She wore a pristine white headscarf, and her chubby arms swayed as she stirred the hot oil. Sarah sighed. The people at the market formed a kind of extended family. Everyone knew each other and cared for one another, but sometimes the questions were hard to answer. "He disappeared," she confirmed, trying to keep her voice neutral. "But my child and I will be fine. We've always managed." "What a cowardly man," Mr. Smith grumbled. "In my day, a man who fathered a child took responsibility." "Times have changed, Mr. Smith," Sarah said philosophically. "But they've changed for the better in some ways. Today, a woman can raise a child alone, and no one points fingers like they used to." The morning passed slowly. Some tourists stopped to look at her products, and a few bought earrings or bracelets. Sarah had a gift for talking to people, explaining the cultural significance of each piece, sharing stories about local traditions. Her natural friendliness and genuine knowledge of the local culture made customers feel comfortable and trust her. Around 11 o'clock, when the sun was already beating down mercilessly and Sarah felt her throat dry, she heard the deafening noise of metal. The sound of metal crashing, followed by screams and honking. Instinctively, she stood up and looked toward France Avenue, which was just a few meters away. A silver Jaguar XF had collided with a lamppost. The front of the car was crumpled. Steam was rising from the hood, and the windshield was shattered. Sarah saw that there was a person inside the vehicle, a man in a dark suit who appeared to be unconscious, his head leaning against the steering wheel. Without a second thought, Sarah abandoned her blanket with the goods and ran toward the accident, her sandals slapping against the hot asphalt. Other onlookers were also approaching, but no one seemed to know what to do. "Has anyone called 911? shouted Sarah, trying to open the driver's door. "I already called," replied a man, watching the scene with his cell phone in hand. The door was jammed, but Sarah managed to open it with some effort. The man inside the car looked to be in his 40s, with dark brown hair and some grey streaks at his temples, strong features, and a small scar on his chin. He wore a perfectly tailored grey suit, a white shirt, and a navy blue tie. On his wrist was a watch that Sarah recognized as being very expensive. She had seen a similar one in a jewelry store window at the mall. "Sir, can you hear me?" asked Sarah, gently touching the man's shoulder. He groaned softly and opened his eyes slowly. They were unusual blue-grey eyes that showed confusion before focusing on Sarah's face. "What? What happened?" he murmured, trying to sit up. "You crashed your car," Sarah explained, noticing a cut on his forehead that was bleeding. "Don't move too much. The ambulance is on its way." Without hesitation, she took a clean handkerchief from her bag and pressed it gently against his wound. The man looked at her with a surprised expression as if he couldn't believe a stranger was taking care of him. I need to get out of here, he said, trying to move. No, sir, stay still, Sarah insisted firmly. You might have injured your neck or spine. It's dangerous to move. The smell of spilled gasoline mixed with the scent of fried food coming from nearby stalls, creating a strange and striking combination. Sarah felt the baby moving restlessly in her belly, likely reacting to her adrenaline, but she kept her hands steady and her voice calm. What's your name? She asked, trying to keep him conscious. Gabriel, he replied, his voice becoming clearer. Gabriel Anderson. I'm Sarah. Everything will be all right. Mr. Gabriel, the ambulance won't be long. He studied her more closely, noticing her prominent belly, the simple but clean dress, and the calloused yet delicate hands pressing the handkerchief against his forehead. You're pregnant, he observed, as if just realizing it. You shouldn't be here taking risks. Everyone deserves help when they need it, Sarah replied simply. And I know a little first aid. I took care of my grandma when she got sick. The sound of sirens approaching brought relief to everyone. Within minutes, the paramedics took control of the situation, examining Gabriel and preparing him for transport to the hospital. Sarah stepped back, allowing the professionals to work. Wait, called Gabriel, reaching out his hand toward her before being placed on the stretcher. I thank you. How can I repay you? You don't need to thank me, Sarah replied, smiling. Just take care of yourself. As the ambulance drove away, Sarah returned to her blanket, where Mr. Smith had protected her goods from the curious onlookers. Her hands were still trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Brave girl, commented Mr. Smith, shaking his head in admiration. 7 months pregnant and still saving people. Sarah had no idea that those few minutes of compassion and courage would change her life forever. Gabriel Anderson was not just any man, and his gratitude would turn into a proposal that would leave her completely speechless. The next 5 days passed in an exhausting routine for Sarah. The March heat seemed more intense than usual, and the news on the radio spoke of a warm front coming from the interior that would keep temperatures above 95 degrees all week. In the workshop in Old Town, she worked from 7 in the morning until 7 at night, desperately trying to gather enough money to pay at least part of the overdue rent. Sarah, you need to see a doctor, insisted Mrs. Thompson on Tuesday, noticing that the young woman looked paler than usual. You've been acting strange since Sunday, and that back pain you've been complaining about? It's just fatigue, Mrs. Thompson, Sarah replied, running her hand over her belly where the baby had been more active in recent days. Once I manage to pay the rent and have a little peace, I'll get all the tests the doctor asked for. The truth was that Sarah hadn't been able to stop thinking about the accident. Not about the man himself, Gabriel Anderson, but about the sense of purpose she had felt in those moments. For a few minutes, she hadn't thought about money, bills, or despair. She had simply done what needed to be done. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. On Wednesday, the landlord of the house where she lived showed up at the workshop. Mr. Smith was a 60-year-old man, thin and grumpy, who owned 3 rental houses in the Maplewood neighborhood. He wasn't cruel, but he was pragmatic and couldn't afford to have delinquent tenants. Sarah, I need to talk to you, he said, removing his straw hat and revealing a sweaty, bald head. All the seamstresses stopped working and fell silent, sensing the tension in the air. Sarah stood up slowly, feeling a twinge in her back. Let's talk outside, Mr. Smith, she said, not wanting to expose her situation to all her colleagues. Outside the workshop, under the sparse shade of an almond tree growing between the cobblestones, Mr. Smith. He got straight to the point. Sarah, you know I care about you. I met your Grandma Mary. She was a good woman. But I can't wait any longer. You owe 3 months' rent, $420 each month. That totals $1,260. I know, Mr. Smith, Sarah replied, her voice barely a whisper. I just need 1 more week. I'm working overtime, selling crafts on the weekends. Sarah, dear, you're 7 months pregnant. Where are you going to find all that money in a week? His voice wasn't cruel but realistic. I have a daughter interested in the room. She can pay 3 months up front." Sarah felt the world spin. Her legs went weak, and she leaned against the stone wall of the colonial house. The baby chose that moment to kick hard, as if protesting the situation as well. "Please, Mr. Smith," she managed to say, fighting back tears that threatened to spill. "Until Friday. Just give me until Friday. If I can't come up with at least half the amount, I'll leave without a problem." Mr. Smith sighed deeply, looking at Sarah's belly and then at her pleading face. "Until Friday at 6 p.m., he agreed. "But I can't promise anything after that, Sarah. You understand my situation." After he left, Sarah stood on the sidewalk for long minutes, watching the street's activity. Tourists were taking pictures of the colorful houses. Street vendors were offering cold water and soda, and life went on normally for everyone but her. She felt like she was drowning in broad daylight, in front of hundreds of people who couldn't see her. "What's with that face, dear?" asked Mrs. Thompson, appearing at the workshop door. "Until Friday," was all Sarah could say. On Thursday morning, Sarah woke up with a different kind of pain in her back, a pain that radiated down her legs and made her suspect it might not just be fatigue. But she had no money for a doctor's visit, so she took a warm shower and prepared for another day of work. It was when she arrived at the workshop that her life took a completely unexpected turn. Standing in front of the workshop door was a tall man with broad shoulders, wearing a white dress shirt and black dress pants. He held a bouquet of red hibiscus, flowers that only grew in well-kept gardens, and was intently observing the facade of the colonial building as if searching for someone specific. Sarah recognized him immediately. It was Gabriel Anderson, the man from the accident. But now, without the blood on his forehead and the confusion of the moment, she could see him clearly. He was striking, not just handsome, but there was something about his presence that commanded attention. Perhaps it was his upright posture, the confident way he moved, or simply the obviously expensive quality of his clothes, contrasting with the simple surroundings of Old Town. "Sarah?" he asked, approaching when he saw her. "Mr. Gabriel," she replied, genuinely surprised. "How are you? How's the injury?" He smiled, and Sarah noticed it was a smile that completely transformed his face, making him look younger and more approachable. "Completely healed, thanks to you," he said, extending the flowers. "The doctor said you acted correctly. If I had tried to get out of the car by myself, I could have made the neck injury much worse." Sarah accepted the flowers, inhaling their sweet fragrance. Hibiscus was her favorite flower, but she didn't remember mentioning that to him. "You didn't have to go through the trouble," she said, clearly touched by the gesture. "How did you find me?" I asked at the farmer's market. "Several people pointed me to this workshop," Gabriel explained. "Sarah, I came here because I need to talk to you about something important. Do you have a few minutes?" Sarah looked at the workshop, where Mrs. Thompson was watching her curiously through the window, and then back at Gabriel. There was something in his expression, serious but not threatening, that piqued her curiosity. "Sure," she replied. "Do you want to come in? Or would you prefer to talk outside?" "Actually," Gabriel said, running his hand through his hair in a way that Sarah recognized as a nervous gesture, "I was wondering if you would like to grab a coffee. I know a place nearby in the Old Town Square." It's a delicate conversation." Sarah hesitated. Not that she was afraid of Gabriel. Her instincts told her he was a decent person, but the whole situation felt surreal. A clearly wealthy and important man specifically looking for her, a pregnant seamstress living in a small house. "All right," she finally agreed. Let me just let Mrs. Thompson know." Thompson practically pushed her out of the workshop. "Go on, dear. A man like that doesn't come into someone's life every day. And look at those flowers. When was the last time someone gave you flowers?" The coffee shop Gabriel chose was on one of the slopes leading up from Old Town, a small establishment with tables on the sidewalk under a blue and white striped awning. It was a place frequented mainly by tourists, with prices that Sarah knew were well beyond her budget. But Gabriel guided her to a table as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "What would you like to drink?" he asked, pulling a chair out for her kindly. "A coffee with milk, please." Sarah replied, sitting down slowly and carefully placing the flowers on the table. Gabriel ordered from the waiter, a young guy who clearly recognized him and treated him with special deference, and then focused on Sarah with an intensity that made her feel slightly uncomfortable. "Sarah," he began, his hands clasped on the table, "first of all, I want you to know that I've been asking some questions about you over the past few days." Sarah felt a chill in her stomach that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. "What kind of questions?" "Nothing invasive," he hurried to clarify. "Just who you are, how you live, what... It's your situation. People at the market speak very highly of you. They say you are hard-working, honest, and that you took care of your sick grandmother all by yourself until she passed away." "And why did you ask me those questions?" Sarah questioned, her voice taking on a defensive tone. Gabriel sighed deeply, glancing briefly at Sarah's stomach before meeting her eyes again. "Because I have a proposal for you, Sarah. A proposal that will sound completely crazy, but it could solve all your financial problems." The waiter brought the coffees, a café au lait for Sarah and a double espresso for Gabriel. Sarah held the cup with both hands, feeling the warmth of the porcelain against her palms, and waited. "Sarah," Gabriel said, his voice low but clear, "I need you to pretend to be my wife for 9 months." Sarah nearly dropped the cup. She blinked several times, sure she had misheard. "What did you say?" she managed to ask. "I know it sounds insane," Gabriel continued quickly, "but there's an explanation. An explanation that involves a lot of money, complicated legal issues, and..." He paused, observing the shocked expression on Sarah's face. "Would you let me explain everything from the beginning?" Sarah couldn't form words. Her mind was spinning, trying to process what she had just heard. "Pretend to be my wife." The words echoed in her head as if spoken in a foreign language. "Are you serious?" she finally asked. "Completely serious," Gabriel confirmed. "And Sarah, if you agree, I can guarantee that you will never have to worry about money again. Neither you nor your child." His words hung in the warm afternoon air, laden with a promise that seemed too good to be true. Sarah looked at the hibiscus flowers on the table, at the elegant man in front of her, and felt that her life had just taken a completely unexpected turn. Sarah remained silent for long seconds, trying to process what she had just heard. The noise of the street, tourists chatting, street vendors shouting their wares, the distant sound of a guitar from a nearby performance felt far away and muffled. She watched Gabriel closely, searching for signs that this was some kind of cruel joke or elaborate scam. I need you to explain this better," she finally said, her voice trembling slightly. "Why would a man like you need to pretend to have a wife? And why me?" Gabriel took a sip of his espresso and leaned slightly forward, lowering his voice so that only Sarah could hear. "My full name is Gabriel Henry Anderson. I own Anderson and Associates Construction, one of the largest construction companies in the Northeast," he began, his words measured and careful. "I was married for 15 years to Helen Smith, the daughter of one of the most traditional families in New Orleans. She died 2 years ago in a car accident." Sarah saw a shadow of pain pass through Gabriel's grey-blue eyes as he mentioned his deceased wife. "I'm so sorry," she murmured sincerely. "Thank you," Gabriel replied, regaining his composure. "Helen and I have a daughter, Sophie, who is now 15. After her mother's death, Sophie went through a very difficult phase: depression, problems at school, self-harm. It was the worst time of my life, watching my daughter destroy herself in pain and not being able to help her." Sarah felt her heart tighten. As a mother about to give birth, she couldn't imagine a greater torture than watching a child suffer. "How is she now?" she asked. "Better, thanks to a lot of love, patience, and therapy. But still fragile. Still afraid of losing someone else she loves," Gabriel explained. "The problem is that Helen's father, Colonel Thomas Smith, was a very traditional and suspicious man. When he died 8 months ago, he left a will with peculiar clauses." Gabriel paused to take another sip of coffee, and Sarah noticed that his hands, despite appearing calm, trembled slightly. Whatever the problem was, it affected him deeply. "One of the clauses states that in order for me to maintain full control, over the family inheritance, which includes not only money, but also historically valuable properties here in the center of New Orleans. I need to be married. If I remain a widower for more than a year after the colonel's death, control passes to Helen's sister, Veronica. And why is that a problem? Sarah asked, genuinely curious. Gabriel's expression visibly darkened. Because Veronica hates Sophie. She always has. She saw my daughter as an obstacle to inheriting everything herself. During the worst moments of Sophie's depression, Veronica even suggested that I admit my own daughter to a psychiatric clinic for everyone's good. Sarah felt a wave of anger at what Gabriel was describing. The idea of someone wanting to institutionalize a grieving child was revolting. Moreover, Gabriel continued, Veronica has plans for the historical properties that go against everything Helen and I ever believed. She wants to sell them to an international hotel company that would turn the colonial mansions into luxury resorts. It's a fortune involved, but it would also mean the destruction of an important part of New Orleans history. And can't you just marry someone? I mean, for real? Sarah asked, immediately regretting the personal question. Gabriel smiled sadly. Sarah, I loved Helen with every fiber of my being for 15 years. The idea of marrying again, of pretending that I can love someone else like that, I can't even consider it. But a marriage of convenience, a clear contract where both parties know exactly what they're doing. That's something I can manage. Sarah took a sip of the café au lait, which was already cooling, and tried to organize her thoughts. The story was complex, but it made sense. And it explained why Gabriel had specifically sought her out. Why me? She asked directly. You are rich, handsome, successful. You must know many women of your caliber. Social class that would accept a marriage of convenience. Exactly for that reason, Gabriel replied promptly. Any woman in my social circle would have expectations. She would want to turn the marriage into something real, or at least permanent. She would have family connections that would complicate everything. Besides, Veronica knows all of them. She would immediately suspect that it's a sham marriage. He leaned even further forward, his voice gaining urgency. But you, Sarah, you saved my life without expecting anything in return. You are clearly an upstanding, hard-working person. You're in a situation where you need financial help, but you don't seem like someone who would try to take advantage of the situation beyond what was agreed. And what exactly would the agreement be? Sarah asked, her practical mind taking control despite her initial shock. Gabriel took a deep breath before responding. A simple civil marriage, just on paper. You would move into my house in Maplewood. It's a large mansion. You would have your own room and total privacy. We would need to appear together at some social events to make it convincing. The period would be 9 months, enough time to fulfill the requirements of the will. He paused, studying Sarah's reaction before continuing. In exchange, I would cover all your medical expenses until the baby is born, including the best private hospital in the city. You would receive $5,000 a month for your personal needs, and at the end of the 9 months, a bonus of $50,000. Sarah felt her head spin. $50,000 was more money than she could save in 5 years of working at the shop. That's a lot of money, she managed to say. For me, Sarah, it's an insignificant amount compared to what is at stake. The family's properties are worth over $20 million. And more important than the money, it's about protecting Sophie and preserving the legacy that Helen wanted to leave. Sarah looked at the hibiscus flowers on the table, then at Gabriel, and finally at her own prominent belly. The baby chose that moment to give a series of kicks, as if reacting to its mother's stress. And what if people find out that it's all fake? She asked. That's why I chose you, Gabriel replied. A 7-month pregnant seamstress I happened to meet after an accident. It's the perfect story. The rich man who fell in love with the simple woman who saved his life. Romantic enough to be convincing, unusual enough to deflect suspicion. Mr. Gabriel, Sarah said slowly, what you're proposing, it would completely change my life. And my child's life. How can I make such a decision just like that? Gabriel nodded in understanding. You're right. It's a huge decision. But Sarah, he hesitated, as if debating internally whether to continue. When I asked questions about you, I found out that you're being evicted this week for non-payment of rent. Sarah felt her face heat with shame and anger. You had no right to investigate my private life. You're right, and I apologize, Gabriel said genuinely. But my intention was not to humiliate you. It was to show that this could be the perfect solution for both our problems. You need financial security for you and your child. I need a convincing wife for 9 months. Sarah stood up abruptly, feeling a mix of humiliation and fury. So you think that because I'm poor and desperate, I'll accept any absurd proposal that comes my way? Gabriel also stood up, clearly concerned about her reaction. No, Sarah, that's not it. Please let me explain better. You don't need to explain anything, Sarah said, picking up the flowers from the table. Thank you for the coffee and the flowers, Mr. Gabriel, but I am not a commodity to be bought when on sale. She turned to leave, but Gabriel's voice stopped her. Sarah, wait. At least take this. She turned and saw that he was extending an elegant business card and a white envelope. My card is here in case you change your mind. And in the envelope there are $2,000, he said calmly. It's not payment for anything, nor an attempt to bribe. Just consider it a late payment for the help you gave me on Sunday. You saved my life, Sarah. That is worth much more than $2,000. Sarah looked at the envelope, then at Gabriel. For a moment, her pride battled her practical need. $2,000 would cover the overdue rent and still leave her with $600 for other necessities. I can't accept this, she said, but her voice was less firm now. You can, Gabriel insisted gently. It has nothing to do with my proposal. You did something good for a stranger without expecting anything in return. Let me repay you in the same way. Sarah hesitated for long seconds before extending her hand to take the envelope and the card. Thank you, she murmured. But about your proposal, think about it, Gabriel said. You don't need to give me an answer now. But Sarah, know that my offer is sincere and that I would fully respect the terms of the agreement. You wouldn't just be a disguised employee. You would be a partner in a situation that benefits us both. Sarah nodded briefly and stepped away, walking through the cobblestone streets of Old Town with her legs trembling and her mind in turmoil. In her bag, the envelope with $2,000 felt heavier than it should, and in her other hand, the hibiscus flowers exuded their sweet fragrance in the warm afternoon air. She had no idea that, at that very moment, her life had already changed forever, regardless of the decision she would make. Gabriel Anderson had entered her world, bringing with him possibilities she had never imagined and complications that were yet to come. Sarah spent the entire night awake, tossing and turning in the narrow twin bed, staring at the damp-stained ceiling and listening to the nighttime noises of the boarding house. The baby seemed to share her restlessness, constantly moving and making her belly ripple visibly under the thin sheet. The envelope with $2,000 was hidden inside the pillowcase, and she could feel its bulk every time she adjusted the pillow. Pretend to be my wife for 9 months. Gabriel's words echoed in her mind like a disturbing mantra. In the darkness of the room, the proposal felt even more surreal, as if it had been part of a very vivid dream. At 5 in the morning, when the first bus was already rumbling down the main street of Maplewood, Sarah gave up trying to sleep. She got up, took a quick shower, and made a strong coffee. In the small kitchen mirror, she observed her reflection. Deep dark circles, tousled hair, the expression of someone who had spent the whole night in internal conflict. In the workshop, Mrs. Thompson immediately noticed her state. "What's with that face? You look like you've seen a ghost," the woman commented, watching Sarah sit heavily in front of the sewing machine. "Mrs. Thompson," Sarah began hesitantly, "do you believe that sometimes life offers opportunities that seem too good to be true?" Thompson stopped organizing the fabrics and looked at Sarah attentively. At 60, she had seen it all in life and developed a keen instinct for recognizing when someone was facing an important decision. "It depends, my dear. What kind of opportunity?" Sarah hesitated, deciding to share only part of the truth. "That man from yesterday, the one in the accident. He offered me a job. A very well-paid job, but complicated." "What kind of job?" Thompson asked, her voice taking on a protective tone. Nothing indecent," Sarah rushed to clarify. "But it would be something that would completely change my life. And my son's life." Thompson moved closer and sat in a nearby chair, her calloused hands resting on Sarah's. "Sarah, I knew your Grandma Mary when she was younger than you. She was a wise woman who always said that life offers opportunities disguised as problems, and problems disguised as opportunities. The secret is knowing how to distinguish one from the other. And how do you do that?" "By asking 3 questions," Thompson replied with the authority of someone who had navigated many storms in life. "First, will this harm you or your child? Second, does this compromise your values, your dignity? Third, are you making this decision out of fear or wisdom?" Sarah reflected on the words while she began to work on a navy blue blouse. Thompson's questions echoed in her mind as the machine's needle pierced the fabric in a steady rhythm. Around 10 o'clock, a young man appeared in the workshop carrying a huge bouquet of white and red roses, along with a basket of fine fruits that Sarah recognized as being sold in the upscale markets. "I'm looking for Sarah Johnson," the young man said, consulting a paper in his hand. All the seamstresses stopped working and looked at Sarah, who stood up in surprise. "That's me," she said. "Special delivery," the young man announced, extending the flowers and the basket. "There's a card here too." Sarah took the small cream-colored card, obviously of high quality, and read the handwritten message in elegant script. "Sarah, I apologize if it seemed yesterday that I was trying to buy your dignity. That was not my intention. These flowers and fruits are just a small gift for your health and the babies, no strings attached. Respectfully, Gabriel." "Oh my God, Sarah," whispered one of the younger seamstresses. "What kind of man is courting you?" Sarah felt her face heat up. "It's not courting, it's complicated." Thompson examined the flowers and the basket with an experienced eye. "Girl, white roses mean respect and purity of intentions. And these fruits, papaya, mango, grapes, all good for pregnant women." This man did his homework. During lunch, Sarah took refuge in a small park near the workshop, eating a simple lunch of rice, beans, and chicken that she had brought from home. The roses were in an improvised vase beside her, and she couldn't stop admiring their beauty. How long had it been since she received flowers? In fact, David had never given her flowers during their 3 months of dating. It was there, sitting on a wooden bench under the shade of a flowering tree, that Sarah began to seriously consider Gabriel's proposal. Not because of the gifts, though they were touching, but because of the possibilities they represented. $5,000 a month, $50,000 in the end. For someone who earned $800 a month when lucky, those were almost imaginary amounts. Her son could be born in the best hospital in the city, with the best doctors. He could attend quality private schools. He would have opportunities that she could never provide on her own. But there were practical questions that deeply concerned her. What would it be like to live in Gabriel's house? And his teenage daughter, how would she react to a stranger invading her life? And what would happen after the 9 months? Would she return to her previous life as if nothing had happened? In the afternoon, a new surprise awaited her. Around 3 o'clock, an elegant woman in her 40s appeared in the workshop. She wore a perfectly tailored beige dress, low-heeled genuine leather shoes, and carried a handbag that Sarah recognized as being from a famous brand she saw in the windows of upscale malls. "I'm looking for Sarah Johnson," the woman said in a polite but firm voice. "That's me," Sarah replied, standing up slowly. "My name is Veronica Anderson," the woman introduced herself, and Sarah felt a chill in her stomach upon recognizing the name. She was Gabriel's sister-in-law, the one who wanted to admit his daughter to a psychiatric clinic. "Can we talk privately?" Veronica asked, her smile not reaching her eyes. Sarah looked at Thompson, who made an almost imperceptible gesture, with her head indicating that she did not trust the visitor. But Sarah's curiosity was stronger. "We can talk outside," she agreed. On the cobblestone sidewalk under the strong afternoon sun, Veronica got straight to the point. "I know Gabriel made you an offer," she said, closely observing Sarah's reaction. "An offer that involves pretending to be his wife." Sarah tried to maintain a neutral expression, but she knew her face had betrayed her. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said cautiously. Veronica laughed, but it was a sound devoid of warmth. "Sarah, dear, don't take me for a fool. Gabriel is predictable. After 2 years of dramatic mourning, it was only a matter of time before he tried some desperate scheme to maintain control of the inheritance." She opened her designer handbag and pulled out an envelope similar to the one Gabriel had given her. "What did he offer? 5,000 a month? 10,000? Whatever it is, I can double it," Veronica said confidently. "All you need to do is refuse his offer and disappear from my family's life." Sarah felt a wave of anger rising in her chest. "Do you think I'm merchandise that goes to the highest bidder?" "Don't take offense, dear," Veronica replied condescendingly. "I'm just being practical. You're a hard-working young woman in a tough situation. There's no shame in accepting financial help. And why would you do that?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious about the woman's motivations. Veronica's false smile faded, revealing a harder, more determined expression. "Because Gabriel is destroying my niece with this obsession with the past. Sophie needs stability, a true maternal figure, not a farce that will only confuse her further. And because the family properties could be much more profitable than Gabriel imagines." "You want to sell the historic properties," Sarah said, recalling Gabriel's words. "I want to develop them," Veronica corrected. "Turn them into something that generates jobs and income for the city, instead of just sitting there like dusty museums that no one visits." Sarah studied Veronica's face, trying to decipher her true motivations. There was something in her speech that sounded rehearsed, as if she had repeated these arguments many times to convince herself. "I need to think," Sarah finally said. "Of course," Veronica agreed, extending the envelope. "But don't take too long. Some trains only pass once in a lifetime." After Veronica left, Sarah stood on the sidewalk holding 2 envelopes, one from Gabriel with $2,000, another from Veronica with an amount she hadn't dared to count yet. Her life, which a week ago was simply difficult, had now become a battlefield between 2 wealthy people who wanted to use her for their own ends. "Sarah," called Mrs. Thompson from the workshop door. "Are you okay?" "Who was that woman?" "Someone who complicated my situation even more," Sarah replied honestly. "That night, after paying Mr. Smith and settling the rent issue with Gabriel's money, Sarah sat in the small yard of the townhouse and watched the stars that managed to shine through the city's light pollution. The baby was quiet, as if he too were reflecting on the changes to come. For the first time in months, Sarah wasn't worried about money for the next day. But now she had much bigger concerns. What decision would she make about Gabriel? And how would that decision affect not only her life, but the life of her unborn child? The envelope from Veronica remained sealed on her dresser. Sarah knew that regardless of the amount it contained, what was truly at stake wasn't money, but the kind of person she would choose to be from that point on. The next morning, Friday, Sarah woke up with a crystal-clear decision in her mind. During the night, between short periods of restless sleep, a certainty had formed in her heart. She couldn't run away from this opportunity out of pride. Her son deserved more than she could offer alone, and Gabriel seemed genuine in his need for help. At 7 in the morning, even before leaving for work, Sarah took Gabriel's card and dialed the number. Her hands trembled slightly as she waited for the call to connect. "Gabriel Anderson," a familiar voice answered on the other end of the line. "Mr. Gabriel?" "It's Sarah," she said, her voice steadier than she thought she could manage. "Can I talk to you today?" "About your offer." There was a brief pause, and Sarah could almost hear the relief in his voice when he replied. "Of course, Sarah. When and where do you prefer?" "After work. Around 7? "Perfect. Can I pick you up at the workshop?" Sarah hesitated. She wasn't ready for the spectacle of Gabriel showing up with his expensive car in front of the workshop again. Actually, I'd prefer to meet somewhere neutral. How about the same cafe as yesterday? Agreed, Sarah. Thank you for calling. After hanging up, Sarah felt strangely relieved. The decision was made. All that was left was to finalize the details. But before leaving for work, she opened the envelope from Veronica that she had left untouched the night before. Inside, she counted $10,000 in $100 bills. The amount left her momentarily breathless. It was more money than she had ever held in her hands in her entire life. But strangely, seeing those bills only confirmed her decision to accept Gabriel's offer. Veronica was clearly desperate to prevent the marriage, which meant Gabriel was right about his intentions regarding the historic properties and his daughter. At the workshop, the day passed slowly. Sarah tried to focus on her work, but her mind constantly wandered to the conversation she would have with Gabriel. Mrs. Thompson noticed her distraction, but respectfully didn't ask questions, although her eyes showed maternal concern. Around 5 in the afternoon, another delivery arrived at the workshop. This time it wasn't flowers, but a small, elegant package with a card. "For you to wear tonight if you decide to accept my offer. With respect and hope, Gabriel." Inside the wrapping was a maternity dress in navy blue, made from a soft fabric of obviously superior quality to anything Sarah owned. The cut was elegant yet understated, perfect for highlighting her natural beauty without being overly flashy. "This man has good taste," commented Mrs. Thompson, admiring the dress. "And more importantly, he has thoughtfulness. He didn't buy anything extravagant or vulgar. He chose something that respects you." Sarah carefully tucked the dress into her bag. At 6:30, she said goodbye to Mrs. Thompson with a longer hug than usual. "Take care, my daughter," the older woman whispered. "And remember what your grandma always said. Trust your heart, but take your head along." In the workshop bathroom, Sarah changed clothes. The dress fit her perfectly, elegantly accentuating her pregnant belly. She let her hair down from its usual bun, allowing her natural curls to frame her face, and applied a bit of the light pink lipstick she kept for special occasions. When she arrived at the cafe, Gabriel was already waiting at the same table as before. He stood up immediately upon seeing her, and Sarah noticed a flash of genuine admiration in his eyes. "You look beautiful," he said simply, pulling out a chair for her. "The dress is perfect," Sarah replied as she sat down. "Thank you." "Sarah," Gabriel began as she settled in, "before you say anything, I need to clarify something important. Yesterday, after you left, I realized I didn't explain properly how our day-to-day arrangement would work." He seemed nervous, running his hand through his hair in a gesture Sarah was beginning to recognize. "When I said you would have total privacy, I meant exactly that. The mansion has 8 bedrooms. You would have your own room with a private bathroom, and an adjacent room that you could use however you wanted. Office, sewing studio, nursery when the baby arrives." Sarah nodded, appreciating the care with which he was explaining the details. "And about your daughter?" she asked. "How would she react to a stranger living in her home?" Gabriel sighed deeply. "Sophie is complicated. She's still dealing with the loss of her mother, and she is afraid of getting attached to someone who might disappear from her life. But she is also intelligent and mature for her age. I intend to be honest with her about our situation. Completely honest? Not about the legal and financial details, but yes, about the fact that our marriage is an arrangement between 2 people who respect each other and want to help one another. Sophie understands concepts of partnership and cooperation better than many adults." Sarah took a sip of the cashew juice she had ordered. Gabriel had remembered that she was avoiding caffeine during her pregnancy and considered his words. "Gabriel," she said, using his first name for the first time, "I want to accept your proposal, but I have a few conditions of my own." The relief on his face was immediate and touching. "Go ahead. First condition, I want to meet Sophie before making a final decision. If she completely rejects me, or if I feel that my presence would harm her, the arrangement doesn't work." "Fair enough," Gabriel agreed immediately. "Second condition, I want a written contract detailing exactly our rights and obligations. Not out of distrust, but for clarity. I was already preparing one, Gabriel said, pulling a leather folder from a bag beside his chair. My lawyer drafted a complete document. You can read it, consult your own lawyer if you want, suggest changes. Third condition, Sarah continued, her voice gaining firmness. I will not pretend to have feelings I don't have. I can be a convincing wife in public, but I'm not an actress. I will be polite, respectful, but I will be myself. I wouldn't expect anything different, Gabriel replied sincerely. In fact, that's exactly why you are perfect for this situation. Sarah, your authenticity is what will make everything convincing. Sarah took a deep breath before mentioning the fourth condition, the most important for her. And lastly, after the 9 months are over, I want help to open my own sewing studio. I don't just want the money, I want an opportunity to build something sustainable for myself and my child. Gabriel smiled, and it was a genuine smile that completely transformed his expression. Sarah, that is the best condition you could have made. It shows that you are thinking about the future, not just the present. Of course, they spent the next hour reviewing the contract. Sarah was impressed with the level of detail. Clauses about privacy, public appearances, medical care, even guidelines on how to handle the media if necessary. Gabriel had thought of everything. There's just one thing that worries me, Sarah said when they finished reviewing the document. Your sister-in-law, Veronica. She approached me yesterday. Gabriel's expression hardened immediately. What did she want? Sarah recounted Veronica's visit, including the offer of money to refuse his proposal. She didn't mention the amount, $10,000, but made it clear that it had been a significant sum. That proves what I suspected, Gabriel said gravely. Veronica is desperate, and desperate people can be dangerous. Dangerous how? She might try to sabotage our marriage, hire private investigators to find evidence that it's a sham. She might even try to bribe people close to us. Sarah felt a chill. Do you think she would harm me or my baby? Not physically, Gabriel replied quickly. Veronica is many things, but she is not violent. But she is manipulative and has resources. We need to be prepared. When they left the cafe, it was almost 9 o'clock at night. Gabriel insisted on driving her home, and this time Sarah accepted. The silver Jaguar, now repaired and immaculate again, contrasted dramatically with the simple streets of Maplewood. When would you like to meet Sophie? Gabriel asked as he stopped in front of Sarah's townhouse. Tomorrow? She suggested. If possible. Perfect. How about I pick you up? What time is it? 2 in the afternoon. We can grab a snack somewhere neutral first, then head home. Sarah nodded, carefully getting out of the car. Before closing the door, she leaned in to speak with Gabriel. Gabriel, thank you for everything. For giving me this opportunity, for treating me with respect, for... She paused, searching for the right words. For making me feel like I can be more than just a pregnant and desperate seamstress. Sarah, Gabriel said, his voice low but intense, you are already so much more than that. You always have been. I hope that during these 9 months you can see that too. As she watched the car drive away, Sarah placed her hand on her belly and whispered to the baby, Hold on tight, my love. Our life is about to change completely. She had no idea that at that very moment, on the other side of the city, Veronica Smith was on the phone with a private investigator, hiring him to find out everything about Sarah Johnson's life. The battle for the Smith inheritance was just beginning, and Sarah had just become the central piece of a much more complex and dangerous game than she had imagined. Saturday dawned with a cloudy sky and the humid air that precedes the April rains in New Orleans. Sarah woke up at 6 in the morning with a mix of anxiety and anticipation that made her stomach churn. Today, she would meet Sophie, Gabriel's daughter, and she knew that the teenager's reaction could determine whether the arrangement would move forward or not. She spent the morning organizing her few belongings and mentally planning what she would take if she needed to move into Gabriel's mansion. The reality of the situation was starting to sink in. In less than 24 hours, her life had taken a completely unexpected turn. At 9 o'clock, the phone rang. It was Mrs. Thompson. "Sarah, dear, a man came by the shop looking for you. He said he's a journalist and wants to do a piece on seamstresses in Old Town." Sarah felt a knot in her stomach. Gabriel had warned her about possible investigations from Veronica. "What did he look like, Mrs. Thompson?" "Young man, about 30, well-dressed. He had a somewhat suspicious demeanor. He asked a lot of personal questions about you. Wanted to know where you live, if you have family, about the baby's father. Did you tell him anything?" "Of course not," Mrs. Thompson replied indignantly. "I said you were an exemplary employee, and that if he wanted professional information, he could speak with you directly. But Sarah, are you involved in some trouble?" Sarah sighed. "It's complicated, Mrs. Thompson, but it's nothing dangerous. You can rest easy." After hanging up, Sarah immediately called Gabriel and told him about the visit from the supposed journalist. "It's already started," Gabriel said, his voice tense. "Sarah, from now on you need to be very careful. Don't give personal information to anyone you don't know. And if someone approaches you on the street, don't engage in conversation." "I'm starting to feel like a fugitive," Sarah said, trying to sound casual but failing. "Not for long," Gabriel replied. "As soon as we're officially married, Veronica will have to back off. She may suspect it's a marriage of convenience, but she won't be able to prove it." At exactly 2 o'clock, Gabriel arrived to pick her up. Sarah had chosen a simple white blouse and a pair of jeans that fit her belly well, trying to look presentable but not overly polished. She didn't want Sophie to think she was trying too hard to impress. "How is she feeling about meeting me?" Sarah asked as soon as she got into the car. Gabriel drove in silence for a few seconds before responding. "Curious, worried, and protective of me as always. Sophie has matured a lot since her mother passed away. Sometimes I feel like she tries to take care of me more than I take care of her." The chosen meeting place was an ice cream shop in Little Italy, a bohemian neighborhood that mixed tradition and modernity. It was a relaxed environment, filled with young people and families, perfect for an informal chat. Sophie was sitting at a table near the window when they arrived. Sarah saw her before Gabriel made the introductions and felt her heart tighten. The girl was a young female version of Gabriel. The same grey-blue eyes, the same brown hair with golden highlights, the same upright posture. But there was something in her expression that revealed a premature maturity, that seriousness that children develop when they are forced to grow up too fast. "Sophie, this is Sarah," Gabriel said, his voice carefully neutral. "Sarah, my daughter Sophie." "Hi, Sophie," Sarah said, extending her hand with a genuine smile. "Your dad has told me a lot about you." Sophie shook her hand politely, but her eyes studied Sarah with an unsettling intensity for a 15-year-old. "Aye," she replied, her voice polite but reserved. "Dad told me you met after his accident." They sat down, Gabriel ordering ice creams for everyone. Sarah chose coconut, Sophie chose chocolate with nuts, and Gabriel opted for iced coffee. During the first few minutes, the conversation was hesitant and formal. "Do you work as a seamstress?" Sophie asked, clearly trying to fill the silence. "Yes, at a shop in Old Town. I mainly make women's clothing, but I also do some craft work," Sarah replied. "Do you like fashion?" Sophie shrugged. "A little. My mom." She stopped abruptly as if she had touched on forbidden territory. "Your mom what?" Sarah gently encouraged. Sophie looked at Gabriel, who made an almost imperceptible gesture of encouragement. "My mom really liked fashion. She had a huge closet full of beautiful clothes that she almost never wore. She said she was saving them for special occasions that never came." Sarah felt the sadness in the girl's voice, and a wave of compassion washed over her. "You know one thing I've learned working with clothes?" Sarah said. "That the most beautiful outfit is the one that makes a person feel good about themselves. It doesn't matter if it's expensive or cheap, new or old. What matters is how you feel when you wear it." Sarah looked at her with renewed interest. "Do you really think so?" "I'm sure. I've made expensive party dresses for women who looked beautiful but didn't feel comfortable. And I've styled simple clothes for people who left radiant because they felt good in their own skin." Gabriel watched the interaction attentively. and Marina could sense his quiet satisfaction with the direction of the conversation. "Sarah," he said after a few minutes, "I need to tell you something important. About Marina and me." The girl visibly stiffened, and Marina saw fear flash in her eyes. It was the fear of yet another change, another loss. "Marina and I have decided to get married," Gabriel continued calmly. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah looked from Gabriel to Marina and back to Gabriel, her expression passing through various emotions in a matter of seconds. "Marry?" she finally repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes," Gabriel confirmed. "But it's not. It's not like the marriage I had with your mother, Sarah. Marina and I respect each other a lot. We like each other, but it's a partnership. An alliance between two people who can help each other." Sarah furrowed her brow, processing the information. "You're not in love?" The direct question caught both Gabriel and Marina off guard. Marina decided to respond honestly. "No, Sarah, we're not in love. Your father loved your mother deeply, and that kind of love is unique. What we have is respect, affection, and the desire to build something good together." "And the baby?" Sarah asked, looking at Marina's belly. "The baby is mine," Marina replied. "Your father is not the biological father, but he offered to help take care of both of us." Sarah fell silent for long minutes, absent-mindedly stirring the melting ice cream. Finally, she looked directly at Marina. "Why did you agree?" It was a simple question, but Marina knew that the answer would determine whether Sarah would accept her or not. "Because I'm pregnant, alone, and struggling financially," Marina answered honestly. "I could lie and say it was for other reasons, but you deserve the truth. Your father offered me security for myself and my child, and in return, I can help him with some complicated legal issues." "Legal issues involving Aunt Veronica?" Sarah asked, showing that she understood much more about the family situation than Gabriel had imagined. Gabriel and Marina exchanged surprised glances. "You know about your grandfather's inheritance?" Gabriel asked. "Dad, I'm 15, not 5, Sarah replied with an exasperated sigh. "Of course I know that Aunt Veronica wants to take control of the family properties. And I know she hates me because I'm the only thing standing in her way of inheriting everything." Marina was impressed by the girl's maturity. "And how do you feel about that?" "Angry," Sarah replied simply. "Aunt Veronica has always been mean to me since I was little. When Mom died, she even suggested that I go live with other people because it would be better for everyone." The anger in Sarah's voice was palpable, and Marina felt a wave of maternal protection for the girl. "Sarah," Marina said carefully, "if I marry your father and move into your house, how would you feel about that?" Sarah studied her for long seconds before responding. "You seem nice and honest and—" She hesitated. "The house has been very quiet since Mom died. Maybe it would be good to have someone new there, especially someone who is going to have a baby." Gabriel smiled, and Marina could see the relief in his eyes. "But," Sarah continued, "I have one condition." "What?" Gabriel and Marina asked almost simultaneously. "If you two are going to have a fake marriage, I want to be part of the plan. I don't want to be tricked like a child. I want to help." Marina looked at Gabriel, who seemed to be struggling between pride and concern for his daughter. "Sarah, this could be dangerous," he said. "Your aunt might try to use you against us." "Dad," Sarah replied with determination, "Aunt Veronica already sees me as an enemy. At least now I will have allies to help me fight against her." Marina reached out her hand across the table, covering Sarah's. "If you're sure you want to be part of this," she said, "then we would be very pleased to have you as our partner." Sarah smiled for the first time since they arrived, and Marina saw a flash of the joyful girl she must have been before so many losses and worries. "So when is the wedding?" Sarah asked, her voice taking on an almost conspiratorial tone. Gabriel laughed, and it was a genuine sound of happiness that completely transformed his expression. "How about next week?" he suggested. As they left the ice cream shop, Marina felt that she had passed a crucial test, and that Sarah, despite her youth, would be a valuable ally in the difficult months ahead. What she didn't know was that, at that very moment, Veronica was receiving a detailed report about the meeting among the three, photographed from a distance by a private investigator. The war for the Vieira inheritance had officially begun, and all the pieces were now positioned on the board. The following Monday, Marina woke up early with a mix of nervousness and determination coursing through her veins. Today would be her last day at the Old Town workshop before officially marrying Gabriel on Wednesday. The decision had been made quickly after the meeting with Sarah on Saturday. It was better to speed up the process before Veronica had time to devise any plans to sabotage them. She arrived at the workshop at 7 in the morning, finding Mrs. Thompson already preparing the machines for the workday. The older woman watched her closely, noticing something different in her posture. "Marina, you look strange today," Mrs. Thompson commented, adjusting her reading glasses. "It seems like you're keeping a secret." Marina took a deep breath. She had mentally rehearsed how she would tell Mrs. Thompson about her decision, but even so, the words felt strange when they finally left her mouth. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm getting married on Wednesday." The sound of the sewing machine that Mrs. Thompson was testing stopped abruptly. The woman turned slowly, her expression one of complete disbelief. "Married? To whom? When? What do you mean, Sarah?" "To Gabriel, the man from the accident, the one who brought the flowers," Sarah explained, trying to keep her voice steady. Mrs. Thompson approached her, her eyebrows furrowed in concern. "Sarah, dear, you've known this man for less than a week. How can you think about marriage?" Sarah had prepared a simplified version of the truth, close enough to reality to sound convincing, but without revealing the details of the financial arrangement. "Mrs. Thompson, I know it sounds crazy, but sometimes life puts people in our path at the right moment. Gabriel is a good man. He can give me the stability that my son and I need. And what does he gain from this?" Mrs. Thompson asked with the shrewdness of someone who had seen a lot in life. "A rich man doesn't marry a pregnant seamstress without a reason." Sarah felt her face heat up. Mrs. Thompson had always been able to see through lies and half-truths. He needs a wife, for family reasons. It's complicated, but it's a situation that benefits us both." Mrs. Thompson studied her for long seconds, then shook her head with a worried expression. "Sarah, are you sure about what you're doing? Marriage, even if it's for convenience, is no joke. And you're pregnant, vulnerable." "I'm sure," Sarah replied more firmly than she felt. "And I will continue working here whenever possible. I don't want to lose my job." During the morning, the other seamstresses reacted to the news with a mix of surprise, curiosity, and even some envy. The story of a colleague who had landed a rich man in just a few days fueled whispered conversations throughout the morning. Around 10 o'clock, Sarah received a call from Gabriel. "Sarah, change of plans," he said, his voice tense. "Veronica has filed a lawsuit questioning my ability to make decisions regarding the inheritance. She claims I'm in an altered psychological state due to grief." Sarah felt a chill in her stomach. "What does that mean?" "It means we need to speed up our plans even more. My lawyer managed to schedule the civil wedding for tomorrow, Tuesday, at 3 in the afternoon. Can you make it?" "I can," Sarah replied without hesitation. "But Gabriel, won't that seem even more suspicious? A wedding so quick?" "On the contrary, if we're really in love, which is the official version of our story, it makes sense that we want to marry quickly, especially with you pregnant." Sarah nodded, even knowing he couldn't see her. "What do I need to do?" "This afternoon I'll pick you up at 5. We need to choose a ring, and I have a team of hairstylists and makeup artists who will help you get ready for tomorrow. Oh, and Sarah." "Yes?" "Sophie insisted on being our witness. She's taking this very seriously." After hanging up, Sarah tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept wandering to the next day. In less than 24 hours, she would officially be Gabriel Anderson's wife. The thought left her feeling both relieved and terrified. At exactly 5 o'clock, Gabriel arrived to pick her up. This time, he wasn't alone. Sophie was in the back seat, wearing a floral dress that made her look younger and less serious than the day before. "Hi, Sarah!" Sophie greeted cheerfully. "Dad let me skip English class to help you choose the ring." Sarah smiled, touched by the girl's genuine excitement. "That's great! I'm going to need some feminine help. I don't know anything about expensive jewelry. The jewelry store Gabriel chose was in the mall, an upscale area that Sarah rarely visited. The elegant atmosphere, with its brightly lit displays and impeccably dressed salespeople, made her feel out of place. But Gabriel and Sophie treated her so naturally that she soon felt more at ease. "We want to see wedding rings," Gabriel told the salesperson, a middle-aged man who clearly recognized him and treated him with special deference. "Of course, Mr. Anderson, we have several options." For the next hour, they examined dozens of rings. Sophie proved surprisingly knowledgeable, commenting on different styles and metals with an authority that even impressed the salespeople. "This one," Sophie said, pointing to a pair of white gold rings with a subtle matte finish. "They're elegant but not too flashy, and they'll match both Sarah's hands and Dad's." Sarah tried on the ring, admiring how it fit perfectly on her finger. It was simple, yet there was a timeless elegance that drew her in. "Do you like it?" Gabriel asked. "They're perfect," Sarah replied honestly. While Gabriel finalized the payment and adjustments, Sophie approached Sarah. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you scared?" "About the marriage that changed everything?" Sarah considered the question carefully before answering. "I am very scared. But sometimes we need to have the courage to change even when we're afraid." "Mom always said that," Sophie said softly. "That courage isn't not being afraid. It's doing what needs to be done even when you are afraid. Your mom sounds like she was a very wise woman." "She was," Sophie agreed, her eyes becoming slightly misty. "Sarah, do you think Mom would be mad at me for liking you?" Sarah's heart tightened at the vulnerability in the girl's voice. "Sophie, what I can tell you is that mothers always want their children to be happy and feel loved. If your mom loved you, and I'm sure she did very much, she would be happy to know that you have more people to care for you." Sophie nodded, seeming comforted by the answer. After the jewelry store, they went to an exclusive beauty salon in the upscale neighborhood, where Gabriel had made an appointment with a... Sarah felt as if she were living a fairy tale turned upside down. Instead of being a princess preparing for a wedding out of love, she was a pregnant seamstress getting ready for a marriage of convenience. "We don't want anything too elaborate," Gabriel explained to the hairstylist, a young and fashionable woman named Carla. "Something elegant but natural." "Sarah isn't the extravagant type." Carla studied Sarah's face and hair with a professional eye. "She has beautiful features and naturally lovely hair. I'll enhance what she already has, not create a completely different look." For the next 2 hours, Sarah was pampered in a way she had never experienced before. Her hair was washed, lightly cut, and styled into soft waves that framed her face. The makeup was subtle yet flawless, accentuating her brown eyes and giving her skin a healthy glow. When they finished, Sarah barely recognized herself in the mirror. She was still herself, but a polished and refined version she had never imagined possible. "Wow!" exclaimed Sophie. "Sarah, you look stunning." Gabriel, who had been waiting in the reception area throughout the process, was visibly impressed when she appeared. You are breathtaking," he said, and Sarah could tell it was a genuine comment, not just courtesy. On the way back to Maplewood, where Sarah would spend her last night in the cottage, Sophie chatted excitedly about the wedding preparations. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and Sarah found herself genuinely excited despite all the complications of the situation. "Sarah," Gabriel said when they stopped in front of her house, "I'll pick you up tomorrow at 2 o'clock. The wedding is at 3 at the courthouse, and then we'll head straight home." "Our home," he corrected himself. "I'm ready," Sarah replied, surprised to realize that she truly was. That night, Sarah packed her few belongings into an old suitcase that had belonged to her grandmother. Simple clothes, a few books, family photographs, and basic sewing materials. It was remarkable how a lifetime could fit into a small suitcase. Before sleeping, she sat on the bed and talked to the baby as she did every night. "Tomorrow our lives change completely, my love," she whispered, caressing her belly. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but I'm trying to give you the best possible opportunities." I hope one day you'll understand. The baby responded with a series of gentle kicks, as if agreeing with his mother's plans. What Sarah didn't know was that at that moment, just a few miles away, Veronica was in a meeting with her lawyer and the private investigator, strategizing to prevent the wedding that was set to take place the next day. The battle for the Smith inheritance was about to intensify, and Sarah was at the center of a storm she had yet to imagine. Tuesday dawned with a grey and heavy sky, laden with clouds threatening to unleash a typical April downpour in New Orleans. Sarah woke up at 5 in the morning with an anxiety that made her stomach churn, and the baby move restlessly in her belly. It was the wedding day, a wedding that would completely change the course of her life. She took a long shower trying to calm her nerves and prepared a strong breakfast coffee that she could barely swallow. At 8 o'clock the phone rang. It was Gabriel. Good morning, Sarah. How are you feeling?" "Nervous," she replied honestly. "And you?" "Same," Gabriel admitted with a humorless laugh. "Sarah, something happened that you need to know. Veronica tried to get a restraining order to stop our wedding." Sarah felt her heart race. "Did she succeed?" "No. The judge denied the request because there is no legal basis to prevent two capable adults from marrying. But it confirms that she is desperate. Gabriel, are you sure we want to go through with this? So much complication, so much fighting." "Sarah," his voice grew firmer, "if we back down now, Veronica will know she has power over us. And more importantly, Sophie is counting on this. Yesterday she told me she is excited about having a stepmother and a little brother. I can't disappoint her again." Sarah sighed, touching her belly where she felt the baby move. "Okay, will you pick me up at 2? "At 2 sharp, Sarah. Everything will be all right." After hanging up, Sarah tried to distract herself by organizing the last details of her move. Mrs. Thompson arrived around 10, carrying a carefully wrapped package in blue tissue paper. "I came to bring you something," the older woman said, her eyes shining with contained emotion. "It was your Grandma Mary's." Sarah opened the package to reveal a delicate necklace of small pearls, yellowed with age, but still beautiful and elegant. "Grandma never told me she had a necklace like this," Sarah said, touching the pearls with reverence. "She saved it for a special occasion. She said when you got married you should wear this necklace," Mrs. Thompson explained, helping Sarah put it on. "Mary always knew you would find your way, even if it was through crooked paths." Sarah felt emotional, sensing her grandmother's presence in that important moment. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson, for everything. For taking care of me all these years, for teaching me to sew, for—" "Stop that, girl," Mrs. Thompson interrupted, wiping her own eyes. "You are like a daughter to me. Now go, get ready properly. Your husband can't pick you up and find you with a swollen face from crying." Sarah laughed despite the tears. "He's not my husband yet. In a few hours he will be. And Sarah," Mrs. Thompson held her hands, "whatever the reason that brought you to this marriage, treat that man with kindness. Sometimes love grows from companionship, respect and partnership." By noon, Sarah was putting on the dress that Gabriel had delivered the previous morning, a navy blue crepe design, elegant but not too formal, perfect for a civil wedding. The fabric fell beautifully over her pregnant belly, and when she looked at herself in the small mirror of the room, barely recognizing the elegant woman staring back at her. At exactly 2 o'clock, Gabriel arrived driving a black BMW instead of his usual Jaguar. A more discreet choice, Sarah thought. He wore a dark grey suit with a blue tie that matched her dress perfectly, as if they had planned to coordinate their colors. "You look beautiful," he said sincerely as she got into the car. "Thank you. You look very sharp, too." Sophie was in the back seat, wearing a light pink dress and holding a small bouquet of white flowers. "For you," the girl said, extending the bouquet to Sarah. "Every bride needs flowers." Sarah was touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Sophie. You thought of everything." The drive to the courthouse was relatively silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Sarah watched the streets of New Orleans pass by the window, realizing that it might be the last time she saw the city from the perspective of a poor seamstress. From today on, she would officially be the wife of one of the richest men in Louisiana. The courthouse was located in an upscale area of the city, in a modern and well-maintained building. When they arrived, Sarah noticed a familiar car parked across the street. The same black sedan she had seen a few times in recent days near the workshop and her home. "Gabriel," she said, discreetly pointing, "that car has been following me." Gabriel looked in the indicated direction, and his expression hardened. "It's Veronica's investigator. She wants to document our marriage, probably looking for evidence that it's a sham." "Is that legal?" "Perfectly legal, as long as he doesn't prevent us from going ahead with our plans." Sophie watched the exchange between them with interest. "Then let's put on a show for him," the girl said with a conspiratorial smile. "Let's look like the most in-love couple in the world." Sarah laughed, impressed by the teenager's insight and courage. Inside the courthouse, the ceremony was surprisingly emotional. The officiant, a middle-aged man with reading glasses, conducted the ceremony with appropriate solemnity. There were other people in the room, courthouse staff and a few witnesses from other weddings, but Sarah focused solely on Gabriel and the moment at hand. "Gabriel Henry Anderson, do you take Sarah Johnson to be your wife, promising to love her, honor her, and protect her, in joy and in sorrow, in health and in sickness, until death do you part?" "I do," Gabriel replied, his voice firm and clear, looking directly into Sarah's eyes. "Sarah Johnson, do you take Gabriel Henry Anderson to be your husband, promising to love him, honor him, and protect him, in joy and in sorrow, in health and in sickness, until death do you part?" Sarah hesitated for a fraction of a second, not out of doubt about her decision, but because of the enormity of the moment. "I do," she said, her voice quieter but equally firm. "The rings," requested the officiant. Sophie handed over the rings they had chosen the day before. Gabriel carefully slid the ring onto Sarah's finger as if it were something precious and fragile. When Sarah did the same for him, her hands trembled slightly. "By the powers vested in me by the state of Louisiana, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." This was the moment Sarah had feared the most. How could she pretend intimacy with someone she had known for only a week? But when Gabriel leaned in her direction, his eyes were gentle and understanding. "It's just for show," he whispered softly, "just for her." The kiss was chaste, just a touch of lips, but it lasted long enough to feel natural and affectionate. Sarah felt an unexpected warmth in her face as they separated. Sophie clapped enthusiastically, and even the courthouse staff smiled in approval. It was a touching scene. An elegant man, a radiant pregnant woman, and a happy teenager serving as a witness. After signing all the necessary documents, they left the courthouse officially married. Veronica's investigator discreetly photographed them, but Gabriel and Sarah acted naturally, Gabriel holding Sarah's hand and Sophie walking alongside them like a royal family. "And now?" Sarah asked as they got into the car. "Now we go home," Gabriel replied, and Sarah noticed that he said home, not my home. "Our first night as husband and wife." Sophie laughed from the back seat. "Are you going to pretend to share a room too?" "Sophie," Gabriel reprimanded, but he was smiling. "It's a practical question, Dad. If Aunt Veronica sends someone to investigate the house, they'll check those things." Sarah realized that the girl had a valid point. "She's right, Gabriel. We need to think of all the details." Gabriel drove in silence for a few minutes, clearly considering the implications. "We'll improvise as necessary," he finally said. "The important thing is that we are now a legally recognized family. Veronica can no longer question my ability to make decisions regarding the inheritance." When they arrived at the mansion in the Victoria neighborhood, Sarah was impressed despite Gabriel's attempts to prepare her. The house was a 3-story colonial mansion, painted light yellow with white details, surrounded by lush gardens where mango trees, jackfruit trees, and royal palms grew. The wrought iron gate opened automatically, revealing a circular driveway with a fountain in the center. "Wow," Sarah murmured. "It's beautiful." "It was built in 1890 by my great-grandfather," Gabriel explained proudly. "Helen and I restored everything when we got married." keeping the original style but with all modern amenities. As they entered the house, Sarah was greeted by the aroma of orange blossoms that Gabriel had mentioned in their first conversation. The entrance hall was impressive, with marble flooring, a high ceiling decorated with stucco, and a curved staircase leading to the second floor. "Mrs. Johnson," Gabriel called. A black woman in her 50s appeared, drying her hands on an apron. She had a kind and smiling face and embraced Sophie with familiarity. "This is Mrs. Johnson, our housekeeper and cook," Gabriel introduced. "Louisa, this is Sarah, my wife." Mrs. Johnson studied Sarah with experienced eyes, but her smile was genuine. "Welcome, Mrs. Sarah. The house was in need of some feminine energy again. Please just call me Sarah," she requested. "And thank you very much." Gabriel showed Sarah the room that would be hers, a spacious suite on the second floor, with windows overlooking the gardens, antique but well-preserved furniture, and a private bathroom with a Victorian bathtub that made Sarah's eyes sparkle. "It's perfect," she said sincerely. "The baby's room is right next door," Gabriel said, opening an adjacent door. Sophie helped choose the decor. The baby's room was a dream, soft cream-colored walls, light wood furniture, a nursing chair by the window, and even a mobile with colorful birds already installed above the crib. Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. "You did all this for me?" "For us," Sophie corrected, appearing in the doorway. "For our family." That night, during dinner prepared by Mrs. Johnson, a feast of local specialties that included shrimp gumbo, coconut rice, and coconut candy for dessert, Sarah began to feel that perhaps, just perhaps, that crazy decision could result in something genuinely good. She didn't know that on the other side of the city, Veronica was studying the photographs taken by the investigator and planning her next move. The wedding had happened, but the war was far from over. Sarah woke up on her first morning as Gabriel's wife with a strange sense of temporal displacement. The spacious and elegant room, with its silk curtains softly filtering the golden morning light, felt like it belonged to a dream from which she could awaken at any moment. The scent of orange blossoms wafted through the slightly open window, mingling with the aroma of fresh coffee rising from the kitchen. It was 6 in the morning, and the baby was restless, moving constantly as if also adjusting to the new environment. Sarah placed her hand on her belly and whispered, "Calm down, my love." "We're home now." Home. The word still sounded strange in her thoughts. She slowly got up, admiring the beauty of the room once again. The suite was 3 times larger than her old room in the boarding house, with restored antique furniture, a Persian rug that must have cost more than her entire year's salary, and a stunning view of the gardens, where she could see mango trees, heavy with fruit, and a small ornamental pond with golden koi. A gentle knock on the door pulled her from her reverie. "Sarah, can I come in?" It was Sophie's voice. "Of course," Sarah replied, quickly putting on the silk robe she found in the closet. Sophie entered, carrying a tray with breakfast coffee with milk, sweetbread, mango jam, cheese, and fresh fruit. "Mrs. Johnson prepared a special coffee for pregnant women," the girl explained, placing the tray on a small table near the window. "Not too much sugar, with plenty of calcium, and she insisted on including papaya to help with digestion." Sarah was touched by the thoughtfulness. "Thank you, Sophie. You didn't have to go to all this trouble." "It's no trouble," Sophie replied, sitting in a nearby armchair. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about some important things." Sarah sat down to have her coffee, curious about the girl's serious tone. "First thing," Sophie began, "Aunt Veronica is going to try to come here today. She always shows up unannounced when she wants to stir up trouble. Dad usually can't say no to her because he still feels guilty about Mom's death." "Guilty? Why?" Sophie hesitated, as if debating internally how much to reveal. "Mom died coming back from a meeting with lawyers. She was investigating some irregularities in the company, documents showing that some employees were embezzling money from public works. Aunt Veronica knew about this and wanted Mom to stop poking around." Sarah stopped eating, paying full attention to Sophie's words. On the day Mom died, she and Aunt Veronica had a big fight. Aunt Veronica said Mom was being paranoid and that she would ruin the family's reputation. Mom left the house upset and nervous. And then the accident happened. Does your dad blame himself for not stopping your mom from leaving the house that day? Exactly. And Aunt Veronica uses that guilt to manipulate him. That's why it's important for you to be prepared when she shows up. Sarah nodded, gaining a better understanding of the complex family dynamic she had entered. Second thing, Sophie continued, you need to know that some people are going to try to find out if our marriage is real or not. They will ask questions about intimate details, about how you two met, about plans for the future. Do you have any suggestions? Sophie smiled, revealing a maturity that constantly impressed Sarah. Dad and I created a version of the story that's close to the truth, but more romantic. You met when you helped him after the accident. He was impressed by your kindness and courage. You started talking, he found out you were pregnant and alone, fell in love with your determination and strength. He decided he wanted to protect you and your baby, and you fell in love with his kindness and integrity. It's a good story, Sarah admitted, and it has enough elements of truth to sound natural. Around 9 o'clock, Gabriel appeared at the door of Sarah's room. He was wearing a light grey suit and carrying a leather briefcase, clearly preparing to leave for work. Good morning, Sarah. How was your first night? Very good, thank you. The room is beautiful and Sophie has already brought me up to speed on some important family matters. Gabriel cast a loving, warning glance at his daughter. Sophie, I hope you didn't scare Sarah with too many dark details. Dad, she needs to be prepared, especially if Aunt Veronica shows up. Gabriel sighed. Actually, Veronica already called. She's coming for lunch today. She said that she wants to get to know the new family member better. Sarah felt a knot in her stomach. So soon? She doesn't waste time, Gabriel said gravely. Sarah, I know it's a lot to ask, but today will be a kind of test. Veronica will try to provoke us, look for inconsistencies in our story, maybe even be disrespectful to you. I can handle it, Sarah replied with more confidence than she felt. I've dealt with difficult people before. I know you have, Gabriel said, genuine admiration in his voice. But if it gets too uncomfortable, you can leave at any time. Sophie and I will understand. Around 10 o'clock, Gabriel left for the office, promising to return before lunch. Sarah spent the morning exploring the mansion with Sophie as her guide. The mansion was truly impressive. A formal dining room with a table that seated 20, a library with books from floor to ceiling, a music room with a grand piano, and even a private cinema on the 3rd floor. Mom loved this place, Sophie said as they arrived at the library. She spent hours here, reading about history and colonial architecture. Sarah observed the shelves filled with books, many of them obviously old and valuable. Was your mom a historian? Not professionally, but out of passion. She convinced Dad to restore the house while keeping all the original details. She said we were guardians of history, not just owners. And is that what Veronica wants to destroy by selling the properties to the hotel chain? Exactly. To her, history doesn't pay the bills. At 11:30, Gabriel returned, looking tense. Veronica just arrived, he announced. She brought company, her lawyer and a woman who introduced herself as a family consultant. Family consultant, Sarah repeated, frowning. Probably a psychologist hired to assess our family dynamics and find evidence that our marriage is a sham, Sophie explained with the pragmatism that had already become familiar. The three headed to the main room, where Veronica was waiting for them. Sarah recognized her immediately from the visit to the workshop, but now, in the elegant setting of the mansion, Veronica seemed even more imposing. She wore a pristine white suit, discreet yet obviously expensive jewelry, and had that posture of someone used to commanding situations. Gabriel, darling, Veronica said, rising to kiss her brother-in-law's cheek. And this must be the famous Sarah. There was something in the way she pronounced Sarah's name that sounded slightly disdainful, but she maintained a perfectly polite smile. Sarah, my sister-in-law Veronica, Gabriel introduced formally. "It's a pleasure to meet you officially," Sarah said, extending her hand. Veronica shook it, but her eyes were studying Sarah from head to toe, clearly assessing every detail: the simple yet well-tailored dress, the confident posture despite humble origins, the way Sarah moved through the house as if she belonged there. "And these are Dr. Fields, my lawyer, and Dr. Regina, a specialist in family dynamics," Veronica introduced. Dr. Fields was a slender man in his 50s with gold-rimmed glasses and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Dr. Regina was a stern-looking woman who observed everything with a clinical gaze and took discreet notes in a folder. During lunch, impeccably prepared by Mrs. Johnson, the tension at the table was almost palpable. Veronica asked seemingly innocent questions that were clearly traps. "Sarah, how interesting that you two met," she said, delicately cutting a piece of grilled fish. "It must have been love at first sight for you to get married so quickly." "Not exactly at first sight," Sarah replied calmly. "But when someone saves your life, you tend to pay attention to that person. And you, Gabriel, was it also immediate attraction?" Gabriel took a sip of wine before answering, his voice measured. "I was impressed by Sarah's courage and kindness. It's not every day someone abandons their own affairs to help a wounded stranger." Veronica murmured. "And the baby? It must be a complex situation for you, Gabriel, to take on another man's child." Sarah felt a wave of anger but kept her voice steady. "Gabriel isn't taking on anything. He is choosing to love a child that hasn't even been born yet. It's an admirable quality in a man." Sophie, who had been quiet for most of the meal, chose that moment to intervene. "And Veronica, you seem surprised that Dad wants to start a new family. Isn't that what normal people do after an appropriate mourning period?" Sophie's comment was delivered with studied innocence, but Sarah saw Veronica stiffen slightly. "Of course, dear. It's just that, well, everything happened very quickly. Love doesn't follow a timeline," Gabriel said firmly. "Helen always told me that when we find something good, we shouldn't hesitate to seize it." The mention of Helen created an uncomfortable silence. Sarah saw pain pass through Gabriel's eyes and instinctively placed her hand over his on the table, a gesture that felt natural and spontaneous. Dr. Regina made a note. After lunch, while they were having coffee on the porch overlooking the gardens, Veronica became more direct. "Sarah, do you understand that this family has responsibilities and traditions that go back generations?" "I understand," Sarah replied, "and I have great respect for those traditions, including the responsibility to preserve the family's historical heritage." Sarah realized they had arrived at the crux of the matter. "If you're asking whether I support the preservation of historical properties instead of selling them for commercial development, the answer is yes." Veronica smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. "Interesting how you already have formed opinions on matters you've probably only known about for a few days. It's not hard to form an opinion on historical preservation when you grow up in Old Town and see daily the importance of maintaining our cultural roots," Sarah replied with dignity. The afternoon stretched on, with more subtle provocations, seemingly innocent questions, and attempts to find inconsistencies in Gabriel and Sarah's relationship story. But they navigated it all successfully, supporting each other, as they kept their stories aligned. When Veronica finally said goodbye around 4 o'clock, she was clearly frustrated for not having found the definitive evidence she was looking for. "It was a pleasure getting to know you better, Sarah," she said, her tone suggesting otherwise. "I'm sure we'll see each other very soon." After the visitors left, the three gathered in the living room, exhausted from the tension of the afternoon. "How do you think it went?" Sarah asked. "You were perfect," Gabriel said sincerely. "You kept your cool, responded to the provocations with grace, and never seemed to be pretending." "Because I wasn't," Sarah replied. "I was being myself, just in a very unusual situation." Sophie flopped into an armchair with a dramatic sigh. "Aunt Veronica will be back, and next time she'll bring heavier artillery." Gabriel nodded gravely. "She won't give up easily." But today we proved that we are a united family, and that's what matters most. That night after dinner, Sarah retreated to her room feeling strangely hopeful. The first battle had been won, and she discovered that she had genuine allies in Gabriel and Sophie. The marriage of convenience was starting to look like something that could work, at least in the short term. But she didn't know that Veronica was at that moment in an emergency meeting with her lawyer, planning a much more aggressive strategy. If she couldn't prove that the marriage was a sham through observation, she would have to force the situation in other ways. The private investigator had uncovered something interesting about Sarah's past, something that Veronica planned to use as leverage to destroy the credibility of Gabriel's new wife. The real war was just beginning, and Sarah was about to find out that some battles are won not on the field of honor, but in the shadows, where the dirtiest blows are struck against the most vulnerable points.